Chapter 1. The pain of starting over again and again. There's a specific kind of pain that most people never talk about. It's not the pain of failure. It's not the pain of loss. It's the quiet, gut-wrenching ache of starting over again and again because you couldn't stay consistent. You tell yourself you're going to change. You feel the fire. You set goals. You buy the journal. You download the app. You post the promise. You even start strong. Day 1 feels amazing. Day 2 feels doable. But somewhere between excitement and execution, your energy fades, your discipline slips, life throws distractions. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're back to zero again. And that's when the real pain hits, not from failing, but from the realization that you've been here before. The same cycle, the same restart, the same feeling of letting yourself down. The hardest part isn't that you haven't made progress, it's knowing that you could have, if only you'd kept going. It's not the mountain that breaks people, it's the constant reset. Starting over feels like a new chance, but too many resets become chains. They wear you down, they erode your belief in yourself. You begin to doubt your word. You stop trusting your own promises, and slowly, silently, you become numb to your own goals. You convince yourself that maybe you're just not built for it, that maybe consistency is for other people, the disciplined ones, the special ones. But deep down, you know that's a lie. You're not broken. You're just undisciplined. You're not weak. You're just tired of starting over. But here's the truth. You can change this. Not by doing more, but by becoming different. Consistency isn't about perfection. It's about not quitting when the excitement fades. It's about showing up after you fall. It's about being stronger than your excuses, even when they feel justified. It's about refusing to let your emotions dictate your behavior. That's the hardest part, because the world has trained you to chase comfort, to listen to your feelings, to only act when it feels right. But the path to consistency is built in the opposite direction. You don't wait to feel like it. You force yourself. You show up anyway. You don't let your past define your potential. You use it as fuel. You let the pain of starting over become the reason you never want to again. You stare down that cycle, the one that's stolen your progress time after time, and you decide it ends here. You decide to build discipline like a muscle, slowly, daily, relentlessly. You start by keeping one small promise, then another. You stop trying to do everything at once. You pick the one habit that matters most, and you protect it like your future depends on it, because it does. Consistency is the only way to break the loop. Not motivation, not excitement, not new strategies, discipline, repetition, relentless showing up. Some days you'll hate it. Some days it'll feel pointless. But if you stay the course, if you fight through the boredom, the fatigue, the doubt, something shifts. You begin to believe in yourself again. Your word starts to mean something. You stop needing outside validation because you've built inner integrity. And that's when progress becomes permanent. You don't have to start over again, because this time you don't stop. You don't negotiate. You don't explain. You just keep moving. One day at a time. One rep at a time. One step at a time. Until you look back and realize you're not who you used to be. You didn't just break the cycle. You became the kind of person who doesn't quit. And that is the rarest strength in the world. So if you're tired of starting over, good. That means you're ready to get serious. That means you've finally had enough of the lie. That means you're ready to do what few people will ever do. Force yourself to be consistent, no matter what. And once you do that, once you truly lock in, truly commit, truly become relentless, nothing can stop you. Because discipline becomes identity. And identity doesn't need reminders. It just shows up. Every day. No matter what. Chapter 2. When motivation dies, discipline must take over. There's a moment in every journey when motivation runs dry. It doesn't matter how fired up you were at the beginning, that spark that got you started, it fades. The playlist stops hitting. The quotes don't feel the same. The mirror doesn't scream urgency, and suddenly the very thing that felt exciting now feels like a chore. That moment is where most people stop. They think the fire is supposed to last forever. They think if they don't feel driven, something must be wrong. They say, maybe this wasn't for me. So they quit. They reset. They look for a new plan, a new goal, a new wave of excitement to chase, and the cycle begins again. But the truth? That moment when the feeling is gone but the work remains, that's the test. That's the threshold between the ones who rise and the ones who stay stuck. If you only act when you're motivated, you'll always be at the mercy of your emotions. But if you force yourself to act anyway, you gain power most people will never understand. Discipline isn't loud. It doesn't post daily affirmations. It doesn't care about hype. It's quiet, repetitive, ruthless. It shows up without applause. It works without comfort. It moves forward without needing a reason. Discipline is what drives you when nothing else does. Because feelings are fleeting. Some days you'll wake up ready to conquer the world. Other days you won't want to get out of bed. But your future doesn't care how you feel. Your goals don't bend for your mood, and the life you want will only belong to the version of you that can keep going long after the mood is gone. You need to become that version. That person who doesn't negotiate with themselves, who doesn't ask, do I feel like it, but instead says, I said I would, so I will. That's the shift that changes everything. When your identity moves from emotional to committed, you stop depending on fleeting energy. You become consistent because that's who you are, not just what you try to do. This isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about rising above them. Understanding that your mind will resist discomfort. It will beg for easy paths. It will search for excuses. But that doesn't mean you have to listen. Discipline says, I hear you, but I'm not stopping. And slowly that repetition starts to reshape you. The things that once felt hard become your default. The habits that once required willpower become automatic. You rewire your brain to see challenge, not as a wall but as a signal to lean in. Consistency isn't about intensity. It's about longevity. A good workout once a week won't change your body. Writing one chapter in a burst of creativity won't make you an author. Being kind to yourself one day won't heal your self-worth. You have to keep showing up, even when you're tired, even when it's raining, even when no one's watching, because every time you do, you're casting a vote for the future you. You're building a reputation with yourself that says, I don't quit. I don't need motivation. I have something better. I have discipline. And here's the hidden truth. Once you build that consistency, motivation returns. Not as hype, but as pride. Pride in knowing you've become someone who doesn't rely on inspiration to take action. Someone who owns their process. Someone who finishes what they start. You begin to respect yourself more, because you're not just dreaming. You're doing. You're not just talking. You're proving. Day after day, hour after hour, in silence, in discomfort, in repetition. That's the type of person who wins. Not because they're smarter, not because they're more talented, but because they're more consistent. They showed up when it didn't feel good. They stayed the course when it got boring. They honored their word when no one would have blamed them for quitting. And that, right there, is rare. It's not that they had more motivation. It's that they made a decision. Even when motivation dies, I don't. You can do the same, but you have to stop waiting to feel ready. You have to stop resetting every time the fire goes out. You have to start acting like your future depends on what you do when no one's cheering, because it does. From now on, stop asking, how do I feel? Start asking, What's the next step? And then take it relentlessly. Because the truth is, motivation will come and go. But if you master discipline, you'll never stop again. Chapter 3. It's not about feeling ready. It's about showing up anyway. The biggest myth about consistency is this: that you have to feel ready before you take action. That somehow success waits for you to feel right. That when the stars align, when life gets calm, when energy returns, you'll move. But that day never comes. Life doesn't clear the way for you to act. It doesn't pause for your emotions to catch up. It just keeps moving. And if you sit around waiting for readiness, you get left behind, not because you weren't capable, but because you were waiting for a feeling that never shows up on time. The truth is, readiness is overrated. You won't always feel confident. You won't always feel strong. You won't always feel inspired. And that's okay, because the version of you that wins is not the one who waits to feel ready. It's the one who shows up anyway. That's the turning point for every consistent person. That's when they stop waiting for circumstances to be perfect. That's when they stop letting feelings decide their actions. That's when they take ownership of their momentum, no matter what's happening around them. It starts with one decision: I'll do it even if I don't feel like it. That sentence right there. That's the root of all transformation. You wake up tired, you show up anyway. You feel overwhelmed, you start small anyway. You're unsure, it doesn't matter. You begin anyway, and something magical happens. The act of showing up shifts everything. Movement fuels clarity. Action wakes up the soul. And what felt impossible an hour ago becomes your baseline. Not because the task got easier, but because you stopped giving your feelings the steering wheel. Most people live by emotion. They wait to feel good to start. But consistency comes from choosing identity over mood, from deciding who you are and then acting like it, especially on the hard days. You don't become consistent by waiting. You become consistent by doing, even when your mind resists. Especially when your mind resists. You show up and train when your body wants to rest. You write the page when your mind is blank. You take the step when your spirit is heavy. That's the real power. Not that you always feel good, but that you keep moving anyway. And the more you do that, the less control your emotions have over you. You learn to push through resistance. You start proving to yourself that action doesn't require permission. It requires courage. You build a rhythm. You start stacking days. And soon, something changes. Your body starts to trust your word. Your mind starts to adjust to the new pace. You stop starting over. You stop resetting. You stop hoping. You start becoming. You start becoming someone who's dangerous. Not because they're perfect, but because they can't be stopped by mood. That kind of consistency isn't glamorous. It doesn't go viral, but it transforms lives. Because it doesn't matter if you're scared. It doesn't matter if you're unsure. It doesn't matter if today feels. If you show up, you win. Maybe not in a big way. Maybe not with fireworks. But you win in a way that builds a future. You win in a way that rewires your identity. You win in a way that compounds quietly, powerfully, every single day. So stop waiting to feel like it. Stop waiting for the right time. Stop waiting for clarity. You don't need more time. You don't need more planning. You need to take the next step now, no matter how you feel. Because that act, that single moment of discipline, is what builds momentum. And momentum is stronger than motivation. It's self-sustaining. It carries you through the low days. It grows through repetition. And the only way to activate it is by showing up without feeling ready. So the next time your mind says, "Not today," answer it with action. Don't argue. Don't explain. Don't delay. Just move. Just do. Just show up. Because readiness is not a signal to start. It's a reward for starting anyway. Chapter 4. Discipline is doing it when no one claps. In a world addicted to recognition, silence feels like failure. We've been conditioned to associate progress with attention, improvement with applause, but the truth is, the most important work of your life, the work that will shape you, sharpen you, and set you apart, will be done without a single cheer. Discipline begins where validation ends. It starts when the camera is off, when the posts stop, when the compliments fade. It begins in that lonely, quiet space where the only voice that pushes you forward is your own. And that's the difference between those who build real success and those who just chase moments. They do it without needing an audience. You see, consistency gets tested most when no one is watching. When you hit the gym and no one notices. When you wake up early and no one claps. When you keep your diet clean and your body hasn't changed yet. When you show up day after day and it still feels like nothing's moving. That's when most people give up. Not because it's too hard, but because it's too quiet. But you, if you want to be the one who actually finishes what they start, you have to learn to thrive in that quiet. You have to train your mind to push forward even when the world is silent, because silence doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're building something real. Real growth is slow. Real change is invisible at first. And real consistency. It often looks like nothing on the surface, until suddenly it looks like everything. The man who wakes up at 5 a.m. every day for a year may not feel different for weeks, even months. But one morning, he'll wake up with clarity, strength, and mental toughness that no shortcut could have given him. The writer who shows up every morning to a blank page, no likes, no comments, no "you got this" texts, eventually has a body of work that others admire, even envy. But no one saw the mornings he sat there alone, with only his doubt and a cup of cold coffee. The entrepreneur who quietly learns, builds, fails, and rebuilds without going viral, without trending, without applause, ends up with a business that people suddenly call genius. But it wasn't genius. It was discipline. And discipline isn't exciting. It's not sexy. It's not romantic. It's showing up when you don't want. It's grinding when there's no reward. It's doing the work with a full heart and no guarantee. That's the price. That's the toll for the life you say you want. So you have to ask yourself, can you be consistent without claps? Can you grind without eyes on you? Can you repeat the same simple actions day after day, even when the world doesn't seem to care? Because those actions, they're seeds. And the thing about seeds is, you don't see growth right away. They grow in the dark, beneath the surface, quietly, invisibly, until one day they break through. But that breakthrough doesn't happen without the silence that came first. Your life is no different. You're not being ignored. You're being planted. And if you can stay grounded, if you can remain disciplined during the silence, eventually your time comes. Your results rise. Your life changes. But not because of a miracle. Because you did the work when no one clapped. Because you moved forward even when no one noticed. Because you believed in something no one else could see. Yet, that kind of belief, that kind of discipline, it's rare. And that's why success is rare. Not because it's impossible, but because few are willing to endure the process. Few are willing to sacrifice the applause of now for the legacy of later. So don't be like most. Be different. Be the one who keeps showing up. Be the one who doesn't need claps to confirm progress. Be the one who works so deeply, so consistently, that when the results finally explode into the open, people think it happened overnight. Let them believe that, because you'll know the truth. You'll remember the nights when it was just you and your doubts, the mornings when your alarm felt like punishment, the days when quitting seemed easier, and you'll smile, not because it was easy, but because you kept going. That's discipline. That's consistency. That's power. And no one can take that from you. Chapter 5. Discipline is a war against your old self. Consistency sounds beautiful when it's on paper. You write the schedule. You build the routine. You tell yourself, this time it's going to be different. And maybe it is, for a few days, for a week. Then life hits. The stress creeps in. The laziness returns. The old habits start whispering again, and slowly, without a single loud moment, you find yourself slipping back into the version of yourself that you swore you'd never become again. This is the invisible war no one warns you about. When you decide to become consistent, you are not just choosing a new path. You are declaring war on the person you used to be. Your old self is not going to step aside quietly. That self, the one who skips steps, who finds shortcuts, who chooses pleasure over progress, who makes excuses instead of decisions, it's still inside you. And that version doesn't disappear because you read a motivational quote or watched a video. It fights. It resists. It makes you feel tired when it's time to work. It makes your goals feel overwhelming. It floods your mind with thoughts like, "You've done enough for today. Just skip this one time. You can start again next week. No one's watching anyway." That's not laziness. That's your past, fighting to survive. Every time you choose to stay consistent, you are killing a part of who you used to be. And death is not peaceful. It's painful. That's why growth hurts. Because it's not just about creating something new. It's about letting something old die. Your comfort zone. That's a funeral home for potential. It's where the old version of you wants you to stay. Comfortable, safe, hidden behind patterns you've mastered, but that no longer serve you. But if you're serious about becoming someone greater, about finally breaking the cycle, not just temporarily, but permanently, then you have to accept this discipline is war. Not against others, not against life. Against you. Against the version of you that wants ease, not excellence. That wants familiarity, not fulfillment. That wants excuses, not evolution. You don't beat that version with motivation. You beat it with consistency. Every day you show up and do the work. Even when it's boring, even when it hurts, even when no one notices, you swing the hammer against the walls of your old identity. One swing at a time. One silent victory after another. And over time, you begin to shift. Not because the resistance disappears, but because you become stronger than it. The things that used to break you no longer shake you. The thoughts that used to derail you no longer define you. The temptations that used to distract you no longer control you. Because you've built something most people never build. Command over yourself. That's what consistency gives you. It's not about being perfect. It's not about always feeling great. It's about becoming a person who finishes what they start, no matter how many times they stumble along the way. And that version of you, the one who gets back up, who keeps showing up, who learns from the falls, that version scares your old self. Because your old self knows what happens if you don't stop this time. You become real. You become focused. You become powerful. And the moment that happens, your old patterns can't survive. They die. That's why every consistent day is not just a win. It's a burial, a letting go, a funeral for the weaker version of you. And if you can stomach that, if you can walk through that process without turning back, you'll wake up one day and realize you're not forcing consistency anymore. You've become it. You've embodied it. It's no longer what you do. It's who you are. And that shift, that quiet, powerful, permanent shift, that's what creates unstoppable people. People who don't break when it's hard. People who don't quit when it's lonely. People who don't restart every few weeks. People who rise silently, relentlessly, consistently, until the world has no choice but to notice. Not because they announced their discipline, but because they became someone different. That person is inside you. But to meet them, you'll have to bury the one you are now, and that will hurt, but it will be worth it. Every battle, every moment of doubt, every single step you take when you don't feel like taking another, they are not just actions, they are declarations. Declarations that say, I am no longer my past. I don't live there anymore. I'm building something new. I'm building someone new, and I will not stop. Chapter 6. Why you keep falling off. And how to break the pattern. You start strong. Always. The goal is clear. The fire is real. You make the plan. You even tell people this time it's different. You feel the shift, the hunger, the clarity. You begin with discipline, maybe for a week, maybe two. But slowly, like fog rolling in after sunrise, the fire dims, the routine begins to slip. You miss a day, then two, then a week goes by. And just like that, you're back to square one. It feels like failure. But worse than failure, it feels familiar. Because it's not the first time. It's not even the fifth. It's the same story, the same loop, the same internal war. You try, you fall, you restart. Try, fall, restart. Eventually, it doesn't even hurt as much. Not because you're stronger, but because you've grown numb to the disappointment. You expect inconsistency from yourself. You even start joking about it to others, like it's a personality trait. But deep down, there's a pain, a grief. Because part of you knows you were capable. You just couldn't hold it. You couldn't stay consistent. You couldn't keep the promise. So you start wondering, what's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you, but something is broken. And unless you face it, unless you stop pretending and really look into it, you'll stay in this cycle forever. So why do you keep falling off? It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you lack vision. And it's definitely not because you don't care. It's because you never learned how to build emotional stamina. Everyone talks about physical stamina, how long you can go without exhaustion, but consistency lives and dies in emotional stamina. The ability to stay locked in when your mind is screaming for comfort. The ability to follow through when you're not getting instant feedback. The ability to say no to your own excuses and yes to delayed gratification. And that takes something most people don't build: emotional strength. The world doesn't teach you how to stay when the feelings fade. It teaches you to move based on motivation, vibes, dopamine. It teaches you to chase whatever feels good in the moment. That's why consistency feels unnatural. It is unnatural for a brain that's been trained to chase short-term comfort over long-term transformation. So every time you try to hold a new habit, your brain resists. It says, why are we doing this again? Where's the reward? Where's the relief? And when the reward doesn't show up fast, you quit. Not because you're incapable, but because your mind is addicted to feedback loops. Consistency breaks those loops. It asks you to keep going without applause. It asks you to sit in discomfort without a guarantee. It asks you to walk forward in the dark, trusting the light will come. That's why it's hard. But that's also why it's powerful. Because if you can learn to do that, if you can learn to build stamina for the middle, not just energy for the start, you can change everything. So how do you break the pattern? Not with bigger goals, not with better planners, but with identity rewiring. Right now, your identity is rooted in struggle. You see yourself as someone who tries, not someone who finishes. You believe the loop is part of who you are. That belief must die. You need to become someone new, not with hype, but with decision. And that decision starts with a simple truth. I finish what I start. Not I try my best. Not I give it a shot. But I finish. Period. You hardwire that truth with action. You pick one habit, just one, and you show up for it every day. Not because you feel like it, but because you said you would. You don't give yourself outs. You don't allow negotiations. You don't seek comfort. You seek consistency. You keep it so simple that failure becomes impossible. And slowly, your brain starts to adjust. It starts to believe you again. It starts to see this person keeps showing up. And when that happens, your identity starts to shift. You're no longer someone who's trying to be consistent. You are someone who is consistent. And that's where freedom begins. Because identity drives action. Once you believe you're the kind of person who doesn't quit, quitting becomes unbearable. You stop breaking promises. You stop resetting. You stop letting feelings run your life. And even when you miss a step, you don't fall off. You adjust. You recover. You keep going. Because consistency isn't about never slipping. It's about never stopping. It's about momentum. And the only way to protect that momentum is to honor the process more than the result. You don't show up to hit a goal. You show up because that's who you are now. You show up because you remember how much it costs to keep starting over. You show up because the pain of inconsistency is worse than the discomfort of discipline. And when that becomes your standard, you win. Not overnight, not loudly, but permanently. You win in the way that builds something no one can take from you. You win in a way that makes you unrecognizable to the version of you that used to quit every time it got hard. And one day when someone asks you, "How did you stay consistent?" you'll smile and say, "Because I got tired of starting over, and I became someone who finishes." Chapter 7. Pressure creates power, but only if you stay in the fire. There's a reason why so many people start strong, but never finish. It's not always because they're weak. It's not always because they lack vision. It's because they can't handle the pressure. The pressure to stay the same, while also changing everything. The pressure to keep going when the progress is invisible. The pressure to stay consistent when no one is watching, helping or cheering. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Pressure is not your enemy. It's your fuel. If you want to grow, truly grow, there is no way around it. You will have to step into the fire of self-doubt, the fire of discomfort, the fire of exhaustion, and you will have to stay there long enough for it to transform you. Most people run when it gets hot. They can't handle the heat of self-discipline. They can't bear the weight of delayed gratification. They can't stay focused when everything around them is screaming for escape. And so they quit, not because it was impossible, but because they were never taught to stay in the fire long enough to become forged by it. You see, pressure is not there to break you. It's there to shape you. Steel becomes unbreakable because it is tempered, heated, struck, cooled, and refined over and over again. You are no different. Every day you wake up and choose to remain consistent, you are stepping into the fire of repetition, the fire of resistance, the fire of your own excuses. And each time you refuse to run, refuse to let the pressure make you fold, you become stronger, more focused, more resilient, more capable. But only if you stay, only if you hold the line, only if you stop trying to escape every time it gets uncomfortable, because pressure is not optional. It's part of the process. You want power? Then learn to carry pressure. You want greatness? Then learn to stay in the fire. People think power comes from being fearless. It doesn't. It comes from doing the work even when you're afraid, even when you're tired, even when your mind screams, "Just one day off." Power comes from building muscle where you used to break, and that muscle is built one day at a time, under pressure. So the next time you feel it, the pull to quit, the urge to delay, the temptation to start again next week, recognize what's really happening. You are in the fire, and this is where the change happens. This is where the old you burns away, and the new you begins to emerge. It will not feel good. It's not supposed to. It will test every part of you. But you don't need it to feel good. You need it to work. And pressure works. It crushes the weak parts of you. It destroys the habits that were holding you back. It exposes the lies you've been telling yourself. And if you keep walking through it, if you refuse to turn back, you come out on the other side unrecognizable, unshakable, unstoppable. You can't skip this part. This is where character is built. This is where confidence is earned. This is where consistency becomes identity. So if you're in it now, if you feel the heat, don't panic. Don't look for relief. Don't seek distractions. Stand still. Breathe deep. Dig in. And stay. Because most people will run. Most people will fold. But you've decided to finish what you started. You've decided to become someone who doesn't stop when it gets hard, someone who becomes harder than whatever tries to stop them. That's the real edge. Not talent, not intelligence, but endurance. The ability to stay consistent under pressure. The discipline to keep going when everything inside you says slow down. Because if you can do that, you won't just get results. You'll get power. Not borrowed power. Not temporary motivation. But real, unshakable, pressure-forged power. And when that power becomes yours, there is no one left to compete with. Because while they were looking for comfort, you stayed in the fire. While they were quitting and restarting, you kept walking forward. And now, they have to watch you rise. Not because you were lucky, but because you were forged. Chapter 8. One day off becomes a pattern. Unless you break it first. It always starts with just one day. You miss one workout. You skip one journaling session. You eat one thing off plan. You sleep in once. And you tell yourself, it's no big deal. I'll get back tomorrow. And sometimes you do. But most of the time you don't. Because one day off turns into 2. Then a week. Then a month. And before you know it, the momentum is gone. The rhythm is broken. And you're back at the bottom of the mountain you've climbed too many times before. It's never the one day that ruins the streak. It's the lie you believe that one day doesn't matter. But it does. Not because it ruins your progress in the moment, but because of what it does to your identity. Every time you break the pattern, you weaken the belief that you're consistent, and identity is everything. Once you start seeing yourself as someone who falls off track easily, you start proving it true without even realizing it. You become the person who tries, the person who starts again Monday, the person who just needs to get their life together, but not the person who finishes, not the person who shows up no matter what, not the person who doesn't quit. That can change, but only if you break the pattern. And to break it, you first have to understand it. Because what looks like laziness or forgetfulness is often something deeper: emotional avoidance. You're not just skipping a task, you're avoiding pressure. You're avoiding the friction of showing up imperfectly. You're avoiding the uncomfortable truth that building anything worthwhile demands more from you than you're used to giving. Consistency asks for a level of mental strength most people have never been taught to build. Because we live in a culture that rewards intensity, not longevity. It celebrates the one-time dramatic effort, not the quiet, boring, repetitive actions that truly change a life. But if you keep treating consistency like a mood, it will keep treating you like a hobbyist. If you want to win, you have to treat your consistencies like a lifestyle. That means one day off isn't harmless. It's a signal, a crack in the foundation. And if you don't patch it immediately, it spreads. Now listen closely. This doesn't mean you can never rest. It doesn't mean you have to live like a machine. It means you build systems that don't collapse under pressure. Systems that recognize when you need rest and plan for it, rather than defaulting into it by mistake. It means you structure your life so that even your off days have intention. You don't miss randomly, you recover strategically, because when rest is planned, it recharges. But when rest is impulsive, it erodes. You can't afford to keep taking breaks without a framework. That's how patterns form. Unintended, undisciplined, and here's the dangerous part. The pattern never feels dangerous at first. The first few days off feel harmless. They feel earned. They feel like breathing room. Until one day, you wake up and you're not in the rhythm anymore. Your standards have lowered. Your edge has dulled. Your fire has faded. And you're no longer the person who was moving with intensity. You're just someone remembering when you used to be serious. That's the moment that kills most dreams, not a failure but a drift. A slow slide away from who you promised yourself you would become. You can prevent that, but you have to treat just one day like it matters. Because it does. Not because it breaks the streak, but because it weakens the muscle of consistency. And your job now is to strengthen that muscle every day. You don't let one day off slide. If you miss, you bounce back. Immediately. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. You build a standard that says, I don't live in delay. I correct quickly. I return fast. Because that's what makes people unstoppable. Not perfection, but recovery speed. Anyone can be disciplined when it's easy. But the ones who last, they recover when it's not. They correct course fast. They don't let one bad meal become a bad week. They don't let one missed workout become a new identity. They break the pattern before it becomes who they are. And the only way to do that is to become ruthlessly honest with yourself. Don't downplay the slip. Don't comfort yourself with weak logic. Don't talk yourself into starting fresh Monday. Start now. Because every second you delay is momentum lost. And in the game of consistency, momentum is everything. It's what carries you through low energy. It's what protects you from relapse. It's what keeps you moving when your mind says stop. If you protect momentum, it will protect you. But if you give it away carelessly, it takes 10 times the effort to get it back. So next time you miss, make it the last time. Next time you break the pattern, patch it instantly. Next time you feel the voice saying just skip today, respond with action. Because in that moment, you're either reinforcing the old identity or building a new one. You choose every time. And if you choose right enough times in a row, you won't even have to try anymore. It'll just be who you are. Someone who stays consistent. Someone who doesn't slip far. Someone who doesn't need external pressure to stay locked in. Someone who has broken the old patterns for good. Chapter 9. Consistency pays in silence, then shouts through results. People rarely notice the work you do in silence. The early mornings, the lonely nights, the skipped shortcuts, the delayed rewards. They don't see the pain of discipline, the tears you hide, the choices you keep making when it's easier to quit. For a long time, your progress will feel invisible, even to you. But consistency doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to be kept. Because while the world isn't watching, while no one's clapping, while no one's asking how you're doing, you are changing. It's slow. It's subtle. It's internal. But it's happening. Every single day you show up and do the work, you are casting a vote for the future version of yourself. Not a future built on luck or hype, but one built on earned momentum. And that kind of momentum always leads to results. Not immediately, but inevitably. That's the thing about consistency. It doesn't shout, it doesn't brag, it doesn't demand recognition. It just works silently. Day after day, layer after layer, it builds strength. It builds skill. It builds mastery. It builds a life that eventually speaks so loudly, you no longer have to. You just become undeniable. But the silence, that part is crucial. Because silence is where most people give up. They assume nothing is working. They confuse delayed feedback with failure. They panic when the scale doesn't move, when the followers don't grow, when the bank account doesn't shift, when the mirror looks the same. And so they stop. They tear down what they were building because they didn't get a response fast enough. But consistency doesn't respond to impatience. It rewards those who stay loyal long after the excitement dies. Those who keep moving even when the road disappears. Those who bet on themselves even when there's nothing to prove it's working. Yet, you want to win? Then you have to be okay with looking crazy. You have to be okay being misunderstood. You have to be okay doing the work when there's no applause. Because that's the soil where greatness grows. Not in the spotlight, but in silence. Consistency is like compound interest. You don't see the value in the beginning. The first few deposits feel like drops in an ocean, but then slowly it builds, and one day the curve spikes. The results compound. And people say it happened overnight. But you know better. You remember the hundreds of days when it didn't feel like it was working. You remember the hours you pushed through when no one cared. You remember the nights you chose discipline over distraction. That's the price of transformation. That's what separates the dreamers from the doers. Not talent, not knowledge, but patience with the process. There are people with half your potential getting twice your results, not because they're better than you, but because they stayed consistent when you didn't. They stayed in the gym. They stayed in the business. They stayed in the habit. And now, the work is paying off. Quietly at first, then loudly, then undeniably, because consistency doesn't promise quick wins. It promises permanent ones. The kind of wins that last. The kind of wins that change your name, your reputation, your future. And if you stay with it long enough, you won't have to convince anyone you've changed. Your life will say it for you. Your results will become your resume. Your discipline will be your reputation. But you have to keep moving through the silence. You have to trust the system when the emotions fade. You have to keep walking when your feet hurt and your mind doubts. Because every rep matters. Every word written matters. Every sale made matters. Every small win compounded over time creates a result no one can ignore. You won't need to explain it. You'll live it, and people will feel it. They'll see you and say, "You're different," and you'll know why. Because while they were looking for motivation, you were building discipline. While they were seeking comfort, you were developing character. While they were talking, you were working. That's how consistency works. It doesn't pay immediately, but when it pays big. And it pays in a way that no one can take from you. Because it wasn't given. It was earned. Dream vent up to 10. Don't stop when you're tired. Stop when you're done. Fatigue is inevitable. It doesn't matter how passionate you are. It doesn't matter how hungry you feel at the beginning. There will come a point where your energy runs low, your focus fades, and the question echoes in your mind, why am I still doing this? And that's the moment that defines everything. Because that voice, the one that says, take a break, just this once, you've done enough, it doesn't care about your future. It only cares about your feelings. And feelings don't build legacies. Decisions. The truth is, everyone gets tired. But only a few finish. Only a few push past the emotional noise. Only a few ignore the urge to rest too early. They don't stop when they're tired. They stop when they're done. That's the difference between those who almost made it and those who did. Those who almost reached their goal had talent, had vision, had effort, but they gave in to fatigue too soon. They stopped just before the breakthrough. Just before the tipping point, just before their identity caught up to their discipline. But the ones who made it, they felt the same exhaustion. They heard the same doubts. They faced the same walls. But they kept moving. Not because it was easy, but because they had already made the decision. I don't stop until it's done. Let that sink in. That one belief has more power than any motivational quote, more fuel than any external validation. Because when you decide to only stop when you've completed the mission, you remove emotion from the equation. You stop measuring your progress by how you feel and start measuring it by what you finish. Tired is normal. Bored is normal. Discouraged is normal. But giving in to those feelings, that's optional. And most people don't realize how often they surrender. They call it self-care when it's really procrastination. They call it balance when it's really a lack of urgency. They call it listening to their body, but really they're obeying their comfort zone. And let's be honest, the comfort zone has never produced greatness. Your comfort zone is a liar. It will always tell you you've done enough. It will always whisper that you deserve a break. It will always try to reward you before the work is complete. And if you listen, you'll fall into the same trap over and over again. Because consistency isn't tested at the beginning. It's tested in the middle. When it's not new anymore. When it's no longer exciting. When the vision feels far away and the grind feels never-ending. That's when most people stop. Not because they can't go further, but because they've confused fatigue with a finish line. Let me be clear. Feeling tired doesn't mean you're done. It means you're being stretched. And that stretch, that painful space where your effort exceeds your comfort, is where transformation happens. You can't grow if you stop every time you're uncomfortable. You can't evolve if you quit every time you're tired. You can't win if you rest before the race is over. So what do you do when fatigue hits? You slow down if you must, but you don't stop. You breathe, but you don't break. You rest your mind, but not your mission. You keep showing up, even when everything in you wants to run. Because the future you want isn't built in the early stages. It's built in the late rounds. When your legs are heavy, when your eyes are burning, when your mind is fighting, that's when champions are made. Not in the first few steps, but in the last few pushes, when the crowd is gone, when the motivation has dried up, when it's just you versus you. You versus that voice saying, "This is enough." You versus the part of you that still wants to be average. You versus the fatigue that doesn't want you to finish. And every time you choose to keep going, you win. You win trust with yourself. You win control over your mind. You win momentum that no one can take from you. Because the reward for consistency isn't just the result. It's the man or woman you become in the process. Someone who finishes. Someone who doesn't need cheering. Someone who doesn't flinch at discomfort. Someone who only stops when it's done. So burn this into your mindset. You're allowed to feel tired, but you're not allowed to give up. You're allowed to pause, but you're not allowed to quit. You're allowed to cry, but you're not allowed to retreat. Because you've come too far. You've sacrificed too much. You've started this for a reason. And until that reason is fulfilled, you don't stop. Let the world take breaks. Let others rest halfway. Let the average quit when it hurts. But not you. You don't stop when you're tired. You stop when you're done. Chapter 11. Build a routine so strong that even your weakest days can't break it. There will come a time when everything feels heavier than usual. When your alarm rings, but you don't want to get up. When your plans look meaningless, your motivation feels gone, and your mind whispers, "What's the point?" These are the days that make or break people. Because anyone can be disciplined when they feel good. Anyone can follow a plan when life is easy. But what happens when life throws punches? When tragedy hits? When the body aches and the soul is tired? Most people crumble. Not because they're weak, but because they never built a system strong enough to hold them up when their feelings fell down. They relied too much on emotion and not enough on structure. And that's why, if you truly want to be consistent, you need more than motivation. You need a routine. A routine so deeply ingrained, so automatic, that it holds you even on your worst days. Because bad days are guaranteed. Pain is guaranteed. Stress, loss, fatigue, guaranteed. What's not guaranteed is your ability to rise through it. That has to be built. And the only way to build that kind of strength is to remove decisions from your discipline. You don't wake up and decide whether or not you'll show up. You wake up and follow the system. The system decides for you. You create a morning that begins without your feelings. You create a set of non-negotiables. You create a pattern so consistent that your body moves before your brain has time to argue. Because here's the truth. Your brain will always try to talk you out of pain. It will always seek comfort. It will always suggest the easy route. But a strong routine silences that voice. It speaks louder. It says, "This is what we do here." Not because we feel like it, but because it's who we are now. And when you repeat that pattern enough, something magical happens. It becomes part of your identity. You're no longer a person who tries to stay consistent. You're someone who is consistent. Someone who trains daily. Someone who reads every morning. Someone who works with precision, regardless of mood. And that shift from effort to identity is what builds a lifetime of results. But it starts with a routine. So you have to ask yourself, what system are you living by? What anchors are holding you up? Or are you still running your life on motivation and impulse? If your schedule changes every day, if your habits depend on your energy, if your progress depends on your feelings, you're already losing. You need discipline that lives outside of your emotions. You need rituals. Simple, clear, repeatable rituals. Because the simpler your routine, the stronger it becomes. Complexity breaks under pressure. Simplicity lasts. Don't build something flashy. Build something solid. Wake at the same time. Move your body daily. Feed your mind with truth. Limit decisions. Increase repetition. And never, ever break your chain. Even if the workout is weak, even if the focus isn't there, even if all you can do is show up and breathe, show up anyway, because showing up is the win. It tells your mind, we don't retreat when it's hard. We rise through it. And eventually, your mind listens. Eventually, you stop negotiating. Eventually, the routine becomes the rhythm of your life. A rhythm that doesn't stop for bad days. A rhythm that doesn't fall apart in chaos. A rhythm that makes you unshakable. Because when everything else falls, your system remains. That's the power of routine. It's not sexy. It's not loud. It doesn't trend on social media. But it builds legends. It creates consistency. And it saves you when nothing else can. So build it. Build it with seriousness. With structure. With focus. Make it sacred. Protect it. Because one day, your strength will fade. Your motivation will run dry. Your mind will scream for escape. And on that day, you will thank yourself for building a life that didn't depend on how you felt. You'll thank yourself for choosing structure over softness, system over struggle, discipline over doubt. And you'll keep moving. Not because you feel strong, but because you've built something stronger than your feelings. A routine that refuses to break. Chapter 12. Stay silent, stay deadly. Let the work speak when it's ready. In a world that constantly screams for attention, silence is a rebellion. Silence is discipline. Silence is focus. And more than anything else, silence is power. But most people don't understand silence. They think if they don't announce their plans, they won't get credit. If they don't show every move, they won't look successful. If they don't share the struggle, no one will see the victory. But that's a lie. Because the strongest people don't speak. They act. They don't post. They build. They don't broadcast their goals. They bury them deep, water them daily, and let the world see only the tree, never the seed. And that's where real consistency begins, in private. Because when you're consistent in silence, you're not doing it for applause. You're doing it for mastery. You're doing it for something bigger than likes or validation. You're doing it because it's who you've chosen to become. And that's dangerous, because the world is built to distract you. Every scroll, every ping, every buzz is a trap designed to pull your focus away from the real work. It rewards noise, not depth. Activity, not progress. Appearances, not results. But your job is different. Your job is to stay dangerous in silence. To show up every single day while the world forgets you exist. To grow without announcing it. To win without proving anything. To keep building while others are watching each other instead of minding their own. You want to be consistent? Then learn to disappear for a while. Not in a sad, defeated way, but in a strategic, locked-in, ruthless kind of way. Become so obsessed with execution that you don't have time to explain yourself. Become so addicted to results that you forget to share updates. Because updates are for people who aren't finished yet. You're not here to update, you're here to complete. And the truth is, the longer you stay silent, the louder your success will sound. Because the world doesn't believe in your words. It believes in your results. You don't have to prove anyone wrong. You don't have to fight back with arguments. You don't have to justify your absence or explain your distance. You just work. And then one day, you show up different. Different body. Different mindset. Different bank account. Different identity. And people will say, "Where have you been?" And you'll say, "Building." Not talking. Not convincing. Just building. That's how empires are made. Quietly. Brick by brick. Day by day. And one morning, You wake up with results so undeniable that silence becomes your voice. You don't need slogans. You don't need quotes. You don't need hype. You are the statement. But to get there, you have to become dangerous when no one is watching. You have to stop seeking feedback every time you start something. You have to stop asking for permission to grow. You have to stop broadcasting your grind. Keep your goals a secret. Keep your wins to yourself. Keep your struggles private, because consistency is fragile when it's exposed too soon. The more you talk, the less you do. The more you share, the more you distract, and the more you need praise, the more you depend on others to keep going. But real power doesn't come from praise. It comes from alignment. When your actions align with your identity, when your habits align with your vision, when your routine aligns with your purpose, that's when you start to move with quiet conviction. That's when you stop doubting. You stop looking around. You stop competing with people who are lost in noise, because you know the truth. The loudest people are usually the emptiest. And the ones who stay low, focused, and disciplined, they're the ones who break through. So stay silent, but move fast. Stay low, but dream big. Stay quiet, but execute violently. Be so consistent in your private work that your public life can't help but shift. That's what silence buys you. It buys you power. It buys you focus. It buys you freedom from opinions. And that freedom is priceless. Chapter 13. Guard your path. Discipline is a fortress. Distraction is the enemy. We live in the noisiest time in human history. A world where a single notification can break an hour's worth of deep work. A world where the average person checks their phone more than 100 times a day. A world where consistency isn't just a habit, it's a war. And the battlefield is your mind. Distractions are no longer accidents. They are weapons, designed, engineered, optimized to pull your attention, fragment your focus, and steal your future in micro-moments that add up to years of lost potential. And if you don't guard your path like a soldier defends a base, you'll wake up one day exhausted, busy, and completely unfulfilled. Because the work that matters, the kind that transforms your life, can only be done in silence, in stillness, and in focus. That's why discipline is your only defense. Discipline isn't punishment. It's protection. It's the walls you build around your priorities. It's the shield that keeps the noise out and the purpose in. But most people never build that wall. They live exposed, naked to distraction, scrolling while eating, checking notifications in the middle of deep thoughts, consuming dopamine at every free second. And then they wonder why they feel empty, why they can't finish anything, why consistency slips through their fingers like water. It's because they never made a decision to guard their mind. And your mind, it's sacred ground. It holds your ideas, your clarity, your instincts, your mission. If you don't protect it, someone else will own it, and you'll live a life reacting to everyone else's urgency instead of moving with your own purpose. That's why you need boundaries. Hard ones, non-negotiable ones. Not because you're antisocial, but because you're pro-success. You can't afford to live like the masses. You can't afford to be normal, because normal is addicted, distracted, overwhelmed, and aimless. Normal isn't working. You need to be built different. That means airplane mode during deep work, uninstalling what doesn't serve you, saying no without guilt, scheduling your day like it matters, because it does. And most importantly, understanding this, you can't be consistent without clarity. And you can't have clarity if your attention is fragmented. Discipline is the only thing that glues your attention together. It's what creates momentum. And when you have momentum, everything changes. You stop chasing motivation. You stop searching for hacks. You stop needing someone to remind you of your goals, because you become the kind of person who shows up automatically. But you only get there if you eliminate the leak in the boat. And distraction is the leak. The constant phone checking, the mindless scrolling, the just one more video, the dopamine hit, disguised as a quick break. All of it is killing your consistency. And the worst part? It feels harmless. But nothing is more dangerous than a weapon that doesn't look like one. Distractions don't announce themselves. They disguise as pleasure. They show up with ease. They never knock. They sneak in. And every time you let one in, you lose a piece of your rhythm. So if you want to become consistent, really consistent, you have to treat focus like survival. Guard it with everything. Build rituals around it. Protect your mornings. Protect your evenings. And most of all, protect your mind from the world's addiction to chaos. Because if you can't focus, you can't finish. And if you can't finish, you'll never grow. So draw the line. This is your mind. This is your lane. This is your race. And no one is allowed in unless they respect the mission. No one. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to justify your limits. You don't need to apologize for not replying immediately. You're building something. You're trying to become someone. You're trying to live a life that most people only dream about. And that doesn't happen with an open door. That happens with discipline. Unshakable, unapologetic, unwavering discipline. The kind that gets mocked before it gets respected. The kind that feels lonely before it feels powerful. The kind that looks boring before it looks inspiring. But when it's all said and done, discipline is what builds everything worth having. And distraction, it builds nothing. Chapter 14. Finish with fire. Don't slow down when the end is near. Most people start strong. They start January with goals. They start the week with energy. They start projects with excitement. But very few finish strong. They get tired. They lose steam. They get bored. And they start letting little excuses crawl in. They say things like, "I'll finish tomorrow." But tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And the next thing you know, the work dies in silence. The momentum disappears. The goal fades. The fire goes cold. And you're left with regret. The truth is, consistency is not about how you start. It's about how you finish. Because the final stretch is where most people fall apart. That's where resistance gets loudest. That's where distractions multiply. That's where you feel most exhausted. That's where the doubt creeps in. Does this even matter anymore? But if you stop there, you lose everything. All the hours, all the effort, all the sacrifices, wasted. Because you didn't have the discipline to cross the line. That's why the final stretch demands a new version of you. You need to finish like a monster, like a soldier in the last battle, like a runner in the last lap, sprinting with every drop of blood, screaming. No mercy, no breaks, no softness. Only precision, only execution, only obsession. This is the moment where consistency becomes greatness. Because the final 10% is what separates those who almost made it from those who actually did. Anyone can do nothing. Anyone can get close. But legends are made in that last push. In that moment when everyone else slows down and you speed up. That's what makes you different. You don't coast at the end. You attack the end. You don't glide to the finish line. You drive your knees high, clench your jaw, and crush it with every step. You don't just complete the task, you own it, you conquer it. And when it's done, you don't collapse with relief. You stand up with pride, because you know you left nothing behind. You gave all of it. That's the kind of discipline that changes lives. That's the kind of consistency that builds empires. That's the kind of mindset that wakes up every day and says, "I will finish what I started, even if it breaks me. Even if no one sees it, even if no one claps." You finish because it's personal. You finish because your word matters. You finish because quitting is no longer in your DNA. And when that becomes your new standard, you become unstoppable. Because you don't need the world to believe in you. You don't need motivation to keep going. You don't need a perfect mood, perfect energy, or perfect timing. You just need that fire inside you that says, "I don't slow down when it's close. I speed up." Chapter 15. Legacy is quiet. Consistency. echoes through generations. In the end, all that remains is who you became through your discipline. Not how loud you were, not how many followers you had, not how many people clapped when you posted, but the results that stood the test of time. The habits that built a life so solid that even after you're gone, your story still walks among people. That's what legacy is. It's not about fame. It's not about being viral. It's not about trending. Legacy is the echo of consistency. It's the quiet proof that you stayed when others quit, that you built when others complained, that you chose the hard road every single time, and now that road has led to somewhere powerful. People always think legacy is something you leave behind, but that's only half the truth. Legacy is what you carry every day before you ever pass it on. It's how you walk, how you work, how you respond to pressure, how you talk to people when no one is watching, how you handle failure. That's the beginning of legacy. It starts now. It starts here. It starts in the repetition. In the quiet mornings when no one's checking in. In the dark nights when you feel like giving up but push anyway. In the lonely middle where everything feels stale and progress seems invisible, but you show up regardless. Because over time that version of you becomes solid, unshakable, unbothered, unstoppable. And one day someone will look at you and say, I want to be like that. Not because you told them to, not because you bragged, but because your life showed them what consistency can do. That's legacy. It's silent until it's not. It's invisible until it inspires. It's ignored until it becomes undeniable. And you build it with your actions, not your words. You build it with your walk. Every step taken in silence, every decision made in discipline, every goal followed through. Whether or not you felt like it, you want to be remembered? Then live in a way that even if people forget your name, they carry your standard. Let your children inherit your work ethic. Let your team inherit your mindset. Let your audience inherit your values. Because that's what stays. Not the money, not the trophies, not the trends, but the way you lived. So don't just be consistent for the goals. Be consistent for the person you're becoming. Be consistent for the legacy that grows in the shadows and reveals itself over decades. That's when you win forever. That's when the work outlives you. That's when you don't need to speak, because your life becomes the speech. Final words. From consistencies to immortality, let this audiobook be more than motivation. Let it be your manual, your reminder, your anchor, that you don't have to be the loudest. You don't have to convince anyone. You don't have to follow noise. You only have to show up every single day, silently, relentlessly, patiently. And one day, the world will look around and ask, where did this come from? And the answer will be, from silence, from focus, from someone who forced themselves to be consistent when no one was watching. That someone is you. You are the work. You are the legacy. Now go finish it.